Welcome back to the Creative Life in Motion podcast. And we have a treat for you here today. Today, we have Talor Stewart, who is a licensed architect with over 25 years' experience. His book, Conscious Home Design, has hit the #1 bestseller list in 7 countries so far. Specializing in single and multifamily homes and intentional communities, he works with clients all over the US and select places internationally. He also offers a certification program for other designers and architects to learn the conscious home design method to help their clients apply the life-changing principles wherever they are. I'll make sure that all the details about Taylor are below in the description below. But right now, you might be thinking, Karen, why do you have an architect on your show? So I'm going to let Taylor dive into that because he's the best to tell you. We know that we're connected to our environment and it connects us to health. And what we look and see and look at every single day can contribute to how we feel. And if we feel good about ourselves, we're going to do more good things. And this conscious home design, it's not what you think it is. So Taylor, it's thanks for coming on the show and tell the
Karen,
listeners what they're going to get today.
sure. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be a guest. I love the work you do, and I'm happy to align with it and share some knowledge with you and have a good conversation and hopefully the audience listening in will also get some value. In fact, I promise they'll get some value because the truth is most people won't hire an architect in their life. Most people will be working with the spaces that they have. And so my goal is to, even if you're living in an apartment somewhere that you rent, that I'm going to share some things that you can do to make your space a little bit more supportive of you. And, of course, if you are planning to build a new home because you're upsizing, your family's growing, or you're downsizing your empty nest, and then of course there's opportunities there too. But no matter where you fall on the home, shifting spectrum, we're going to start with the low hanging fruit, what we know to be the single biggest predictor of people's happiness and health and even their life expectancy, and how we can start putting that mind body environment connection to work for you to give you a little lift into your day. Because the home really does play a it influences us, whether we're aware of it or not. It subtly works on us, 24 hours a day. As we're uh, Yogananda, there's a great quote I love by Yogananda. He says, "Environment is stronger than willpower." And that's because, think of like tree root, that's growing under a sidewalk, and just over time, it actually moves, it'll move it. Wood is softer than cement, but yet it wins at the end of the day, because of that slow, steady pressure. And so our buildings put a slow, steady pressure on us. Like Winston Churchill said, we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. And so conscious home design is about understanding who you are as a person, as an individual, and how you want to be shaped, because the opportunity to control your space is the ability to control your future, to shape your destiny. And so I want to know, who are you and who do you want to be? What's the next version of yourself? Let's plan for it. So that's what conscious home design is all about.
This is really exciting, and on the show that I always talk about how we don't wait until we reach our goals to be happy. We fall in love with who we are being along the way. So that
Mm.
means we're not waiting until fill in the blank to renovate this and renovate that, or do this, or start that walking plan, or write that book. We're actively putting it into our environment so that becomes a piece of us because how happy are we when we're completely being that future version of ourselves before we're there? I think it
Mhm,
makes a difference. I know it kind of sounds a
mhm,
little, um,
mhm.
almost like toxic positivity, but you and I meeting was kind of serendipitous because, and the listeners know this, if you've been listening along, you know that I've been struggling with my office. And I had this blemish on the wall behind me because I refused to get out a can of paint. And over, I'd walk in. I tried to cover it up with things. I thought about, maybe I could buy a mural or something. And day would go by, and every day I'd be looking at that thing that I was just not doing. So finally, my husband, he said, just paint it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, so now I'm looking at different types of paint. And I thought I was always known for the green paint behind me, that it was actually painted by my stepdaughter 20 years ago. But now it opened up the possibilities of what's going to make me feel more creative, because this is where everything is born in this room. My books, my podcasts, my one woman show, everything was born. This is my creative room, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. This is the creative space that I have. So yellow popped in because I'm not a big lover of winter. It's dark here. We do get snow, but it's uh I'm a sunshine girl, and I have had like seasonal sadness in my history.
Sure.
Not anymore. So after I finally did the thing and stopped like being mad at myself for not doing the thing, the first morning I opened my door to see the yellow wall. The sun was beaming in the window, and it felt like a tropical paradise in here. And I just went,
Yes.
now there's something connected to happiness and environment. Can you
Sure.
can you share
Yeah.
that? Like, I share that with you because I picked it up out of the book. So share that
Sure.
with our
I
listeners.
mean, so there's so much, right? What you're talking about to a large degree, it's two things. What your experience there. One is something that was irritating you. So there's an environmental irritant, like a grain of sand, and you need to form a pearl around that to remove the irritation. But the other part of what you're talking about is in addition to the irritant or removing it, also changing the space by the color change, right? Which is giving you a different, you know, a different feeling, right? Because the yellow that you've chosen, yellow can actually, depending on if it's too bright or too intense, it can actually create a little bit of anxiety. It
Yeah.
can actually be stimulating in a way, and not and it's not relaxing. But the shade you have there is very calm and gentle,
Mhm.
but it's also bright, and so which really makes a difference, especially in the winter months where the days are shorter. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're working on multiple fronts there to uh, create your space the way you like it there. So um, there's a lot of work done on color theory and different colors affecting people, not just emotionally or mentally. I like it, it gives me an opinion, but there's actually physiological evidence that shows that certain colors will increase heart rate or decrease heart rate, or make breathing more rapid and shallow, or make breathing more slow and deeper, right? And so there's a
Yeah.
the our environment will actually have a physical response to us. And those physical responses are generally more universal than the opinion responses. You may say, well, I like that color, which is true. You might like that color, but it will still have the same physiological response in your body as it would with someone else who says, I don't like that color, right? It will
Mhm.
still present, because we evolved in, you know, nature. And so we have certain colors that we're used to seeing, the earth tones, the greens, the blues, you know, water, sky, vegetation, um, rocks and earth and stuff. And so that spectrum is going to be um, sort of the primordial soup that our DNA was brewed in. And so it's
Mhm.
habituated to that. They found that um, a naturescape, you can look at a nature scene, even if it's not real, a photograph of a big
Mhm.
mural of mountains and trees and a lake, or an ocean with a beach, or even just a forest, with nothing spectacular, no mountains, no water, but just trees, or a meadow. Any of those will produce that physiological response of calming.
Yeah.
Whereas if you show someone a beautiful skyline, at dusk, all the lights are on and the sky's got this beautiful purple hue, and it's very, you see that ridge line, and it can be very exciting and very aesthetically pleasing, but it doesn't have the physiological calming effect that a nature scene does. And so
Interesting.
that's because our bodies know what they like, because
Mhm.
we evolved in nature. So that's some basic stuff there about working with environment to coordinate whatever mood or feeling you're trying to evoke. If you're
Yeah.
wanting a room, it depends on your activities, right? It's activity specific. Some activities are you need more energy and energizing, and others you want
Yeah.
more calming and tranquility. So it's just about selective use of and design and decoration of each space in your house to suit your needs, right? Um,
I found that super interesting when I first landed on your
oh,
website. I'm like, okay, he's not just talking about like designing your house. He's not just talking about like, like decor and interior design and architecture. You have like these specific templates for individual rooms and how to optimize it, which I think is
sure.
so cool. And some of the questions in your workbook, there were questions that are actually probing you like, no, like what do you really want?
Yeah,
Like what do you really want? Because I think somewhere, in the scheme of like designing things or whatever, we start to, like you were saying, we start to follow these paths of I need more money. I need more time. I need to, do all of these things when in fact it can be just like one simple little tweak, which is why
hmm
I mentioned my wall. I mean, you can see the rest of the office still needs a lot of work. You can't see it.
hmm
That's the
hmm
whole point. You can't see it, but I can. And it's still bothering me like that little grain of salt. I mean, sand
Sure.
that you were talking about there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, this is such a rich conversation because there's so much, right? Like, think of, well, it talked about the tree root, right? Putting
Yeah.
pressure on something, right? But another way to look at it is the sort of the snowball effect, as it starts
Yeah.
small, but it gets bigger as it rolls down the hill. Or the butterfly effect, which
Yeah.
is the mathematician Johann. I'm drawing a blank on his last name right now, but he wrote a paper called "Do the Flapping of a Butterfly's Wings in Brazil Eventually Set Off a Tornado in Texas?"
Right. Yeah, I
And
think I heard of that one. Yeah.
yeah, and so this became known as the butterfly effect, which says, small changes in the initial conditions led to dramatic, life-changing outcomes over time, right? And so with conscious home design, we're asking the question, what little 2% shifts could we make around the home that when added up on a daily basis and compounded over years or decades would pay huge dividends in your life in terms of your satisfaction and your happiness and your health and your feelings of fulfillment. So that's really, that's the big idea. And then, there's data to actually support that. I talked a little bit about the physiological, effects of nature and certain colors on us, but it's so much broader than that. There's so much more. Harvard did an amazing study on adult happiness. It started in 1938 and they studied thousands of individuals, and all so it's been going on 87 years now, if my math is correct. Um, at least, well, it was 1938 to 40 to 85, yes, something,
They're
86,
still
87 years,
they're
something
still
like that.
working on it now, like currently?
It's still going on. It's
Oh,
still going
really?
on today.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, the- I, pe- um, they've had at least four different directors running it because they retire and they have to, but the study keeps going. It's the longest study of its kind in the world, and so it's very significant what they've discovered. So they started with a couple of thousand people, and they did health assessments and mental and emotional assessments, and then where are they? What are their circumstances in life? What are their conditions? And they
Mhm.
tried to get a big. overview, a snapshot of who this person was, and were they happy and what's going on in their lives and stuff like that. And then periodically they tracked them over the years, throughout their whole lives, in fact.
Mhm.
And but periodically they would check in with them and do another, medical test and more, psych evaluations, and just, update their findings. And they were able to plot the journey of of thousands of people. And as they age, so they're on to second and third generations now, because all the original participants have passed on after 87 years. They were college age when they began. So, I don't think anyone lived to be more than 105 years old, from the original study, right? So, but it's still going on today. So what they found is that regardless of a person's, health challenges, or of a person's career or business success or failure, they found that throughout the ups and downs of life that everybody has in their own fashion, they found that those things didn't really matter in terms of how happy or rich a life they reported, they said they felt like they had. And they also didn't matter very much on their actual life expectancy, the longevity of a person. They
Yeah.
found that the single biggest predictor of how long a person would live and how happy they would say was the quality of their relationships. And so,
We're
you know,
hearing that more and more now, right? We're
we
hearing
know
like,
that intuitively. We all
yeah,
know that,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
so nice to have scientific evidence, big data,
yeah.
statistical evidence to support it, to sort of confirm what we know to be true.
Don't you think like and this is like this just came to me just now. Don't you think that it's a little odd that here we are in 2025? Like if you could go back and tell yourself like 30 years ago that the toughest thing for society would be like making friends and communicating with each other after we've been connected to the world. So like social media was supposed to bring us closer together, and it feels like, you know, I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, someone came and knocked on my door. The first thing I think is a scammer. Like,
Uh-huh.
because we don't go to the neighbor anymore with a dish saying, "Here, welcome to the neighborhood," because that person will probably throw it away if they'll think we poisoned it. There's
Mm-hmm.
just so much lack of trust. So
Mm-hmm.
so conscious home design, what you're doing is actually, I'm kind of seeing it now in a way of this is a way to help us repair or just enhance or, you know, lift up more our relationships with each other. And you have everything in their different groupings, but there's different types of relationships that matter for our well-being. And can you
Yeah,
break that down for us? How does it all translate into the design?
sure, sure.
Because
Yeah, I
this is
mean, now that
exciting.
we know that the data supports, what we intuitively know, that hey, our
Yeah.
relationships matter. And not but not only do they matter, they are the single most important thing in our lives, is our connections with people. So
Okay.
knowing
We do know that.
knowing that, having the math prove that for
Mhm.
us really can help us inform, well, wait a second, so conscious home design was about is about facilitating relationships. How can I create space? How can we bake it into the mold of our homes that our relationships are supported and facilitated
Mhm.
and encouraged, right? We want to dedicate space for those activities,
Yeah.
because, think about the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is like the most famous painting in the world. And Leonardo da Vinci, it took him 10 years to paint that. And when I realized that, I thought, you know what? This really proves the point. Architecture is responsible for, without architecture, all of our human advancements in medicine, technology, science, arts, they just wouldn't be possible, because we need to be able to control our environment and dedicate space for certain human activities. Because
Oh,
if
yes.
we didn't have architecture,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be able to accomplish anything that took longer to work on than a sunny afternoon. Because as soon as the weather changed or night came and wild animals came, or neighboring tribes come and they'd mess everything up. And so architecture allows us to build on yesterday's achievements and
Mhm.
continue to grow. And so we all have this idea of we all know this formula about it takes time and effort to become good at something, right? That makes sense. You got to practice. Practice makes perfect, right? And I think it was Seth Godin that coined the 10,000 hour rule. He said, hey, if you put 10,000 hours into something, then you'll achieve, expert level or mastery
Mhm.
status, depending on what it is you're working on. But that's sort of like a general rule of thumb that they're throwing around these days, 10,000 hours. But what's missing from that formula is that it also takes space. It takes
Yeah.
time, it takes effort, but you also have to have a place to do what is that you do.
Yeah.
Without space, if Leonardo da Vinci did not have an art studio where he could work on the Mona Lisa and then put it away when he was busy with
Mhm.
other projects or he didn't have inspiration at the moment for that particular painting, then it wouldn't have been accomplished. It only got done because he was able to store it safely in the context of a dedicated, architectural art studio.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do is figure out what makes people happy, what sparks their joy, both universally and individually, and then dedicate space to that activity in their home somehow, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean you need more space. It just means how are we going to arrange the space we have to make sure we're highlighting and not missing out on these things. So in the context of relationships, so that was a big journey to get
Yeah.
to answer your question.
It's good. But yeah, that's
But
what
we
we do
need to
here.
see the whole landscape to enjoy the path.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm illustrating the picture of how relevant and how it all ties together. It's really an ecosystem. The hip bone is
Yeah.
connected to the leg bone. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so Harvard was very clear about the relationships. They said this is not limited to your romantic relationships. The
Mhm.
study said it's all kinds of relationships. You want to have, a diverse, a rich bag, a mix, a healthy ratio of relationships. So if people are single, don't worry, you can still live a long, happy life as a single person. It's that's not what they were saying at all. Um, so when I found out, I was doing the research for my book, Conscious Home Design, back in the teens. I always knew I'd write a book. It was 20 years in the making. It just took me 20 years of practice before I was able to congeal and gel and solidify all the things that I learned along the way
Yeah.
into a solidified message that I could say, okay, now this is worth sharing. This is what I know to be true. This isn't theory
Yeah.
anymore. This is real. Let's present this. So it took me 20 years to crystallize my message. In that process is when I discovered in my research process, I discovered um, the Harvard longevity study. And when I found out that they said relationships was the big one, I said, okay, let's pause here. There's meat on the bone. We need to camp out here and dig some time. We can't pass through this subject lightly. We need to spend time here and unpack. And so I said, okay, relationships, all different kinds of relationships. I started thinking about all the diverse myriad relationships that we have,
Yeah.
and I was like, well, okay, how do and people have different, the Greeks have all 7 different types of love, agape and philia and all these different flavors of love, depending on the type of relationship you have with the person. And so as I dug more into relationships, and I, I came up with sort of my own 3 categories, and every kind of relationship that we have is going to fit into one of these buckets. And
Mhm.
they are giving, receiving, and reciprocal. And so our giving relationships are ones where we are the primary giver. And so those are going to be relationships that we have with anyone we're teaching or mentoring, children that we're raising or looking after or babysitting, even pets and plants and animals. If you have a bird feeder, that's a giving relationship. You're providing food for the wildlife. And so you could say, "Oh, well, I water my plants and my flowers and I feed the pets and I do these things. But I also receive. I get more than I give." You hear people say that, and I
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
it's true. Of course, there's always a give and take in all the relationships. But at face value, it's a giving. You're the one who's initiating the giving, and those things would be perhaps not as better off. They're better off for your presence in their life. You're giving them something. So at the first, there's always a give and take, but at the face value of it, it's a giving relationship. And so then we have our reciprocal relationships, which was what you and I are having right now. It's where, peers or friends or colleagues are, seeing eye to eye, and you can sort of let your hair down and have a conversation. There's a give and take. It's not a situation where you're being, have to be a role model, and
Yeah.
put on your best behavior and wear a certain face to present, as the case would be if you were teaching children.
Yeah.
And so there's a different energy, there's a different comfort level, a different way, a different vibration that you can show up with, in a reciprocal relationship. There's an equal give and take. And then, of course, we have our receiving relationships, and that's where we are the beneficiary of someone else's knowledge, wisdom, care, concern, or love, right? And so those are going to be the relationships that we have with our elders, our ancestors,
Yeah.
our mentors and teachers and coaches, our heroes and inspirational figures, maybe our spiritual figures, anyone that's giving us wisdom or encouragement or inspiration or knowledge or love to help us grow and be reach our potential, just be the most beautiful version of ourselves that we can be. Yeah, so those are our receiving relationships. And as we move through life, Karen, we're going to have different balances of each of these relationships. If you have
Mhm.
young children at home, boy, you're going to be giving, 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 giving. You're going to be like desperate. I see so many, especially single parents. They're just desperate to have reciprocal. Please, can I have just 15 minutes of reciprocal relationship right now?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
I need a balance, right? And so there's going to be times in your life where things maybe are unbalanced. That's okay. It's
Mhm.
just over the scope of your life, you want to have a rich mixture and a rich balance of all three types, all three categories of relationship. And what that looks like is going to be individual. Different people have different needs. Some people are introverted, some people are extroverted. People have
Mhm.
different sort of social expectations or desires or requirements that they have. And so, that's going to be an organic thing for each individual. However,
Mhm.
we just know that we want to have all three kinds of relationship in our life, no matter who you are. And so for conscious home design, I say, let's make sure that in the home, whether it's a brand new house we're building or it's an apartment that you're just redecorating right now, how can we make sure that we have opportunity for all three kinds of relationship in the home? And so
Wild.
that's it in a nutshell right there. Yeah.
I love how you boiled it down to 3. That's my kinda talk, like, when I help people through their life planning, like, getting to their goals, I always like to talk about life as an ecosystem. Like, instead of, like, let's make 1,000 goals and let's try and reach them all in the next year. Um I've often said that every goal that you set is like a kitchen renovation. Once you open it up, it usually takes twice as long and 2 times more money
Mhm,
to get
mhm.
there because there's always all these little things. So if we boil it down to 3 things, do one thing for your mind, one thing for your body, and one thing that fulfills your purpose, you'll find that you can get more momentum because it's easier to grasp. So you have all you're saying the same thing. You have all these different types of relationships, but let's just boil it down to 3 so that we can have simpler, easier, more cohesive success in what we're trying to do here. And I just love that. This it makes it a lot more easier to kind of have a view through an architect's eyes, because like this is a lot. Like you talked about this being an ecosystem, and like every door you open, there's just like a wealth of more knowledge there on how we can like really take action on this immediately, right? Um, so
Yeah.
in your experience, um, when you're thinking about what a home truly needs to provide, like um how do you framework this?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
when you're how do you get started?
Sure, sure. So, yeah, there's really I like to refer to Maslow, actually. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist. His work really took off, started to gain fame in the late 1950s, and has stood the test of time, since then. So um, he's most famous for I think most people would recognize Maslow's the hierarchy of human needs pyramid. And Maslow basically, he called it out, but he was able to put it into a framework. It says that, hey, we're not just animals. We need more than, shelter and food and a place to sleep, and a chance to procreate. We have higher needs. We're complicated beings. We have personal development needs. We want to feel like we're good at something, or like that we're growing and we're becoming better. That we're adept, that we have aptitude and skill. We want to feel like we have love and belonging and connections with others. We don't want to feel isolated and alone. We also have creative expression needs. We want to feel like we can just do something that's creative, whether it's profitable or not doesn't matter. You could do model trains, or you could paint, or you could play a musical instrument, or you could do clay on the potter's wheel, or you could do podcasting, or you could do creative writing and journaling. Your creative, your work might be creative, but outside of work, people also want to do something creative too, whether cooking or any number of things, however
Mhm.
it shows up for you, right? And so going back to what we know from the Mona Lisa, and that we're more successful when we dedicate space to an activity. I look through um, a home and I say, well, who are you, and what kind of creative activity do you like to do? And say, well, let's see if we can dedicate space for that. Where could we do that activity? Because if you dedicate space to it, you're just making a value statement. You're saying, hey, this is important to me. You're raising your hand. This is a part of me. I value this. I'm going to dedicate a little space to it. I may not have the time to do it as much as I like, but just by carving out the niche, the nook, or the a whole room, if you have that much space, then you're, raising your hand and saying, hey, this is important to me. It is a priority. And so then, even if you just do it for 5 minutes, every step we take in the direction of our dreams is
Mhm.
self-affirming. And it sets up a positive feedback loop. It says, hey, you know what? My future is a little bit more attainable. My destiny is within my control. I have the ability to shape, because I can choose things that I like, things that feed me, things that make me sparkle. And so we're trying to give you opportunities to do that, so that you can, be happy, because happy people are better neighbors and are better citizens, right? It's like world peace. Let it begin with me. If Maslow says, like, if someone's starving to death, they really don't care if someone respects them. It's like, hey, that's nice, great. I'm respected in the community, but please just give me a sandwich. I need a bowl of soup right now. It's like, so we have certain priorities in life, right? And so when we can satisfy our shelter needs, but then also our higher needs, then we start to say, okay, I'm feeling good in life. How do I engage the world around me? And so happy people are going to send ripple effects out into, people are going to be better citizens. So that's the whole, upward spiral of the adventure.
Yeah, like I find that a lot of times in creative space or in health space, which is what I talk a lot about on, on this podcast. And when we're in the creative space or the health space, it's all about proactivity. So it's usually the first thing that falls off the plate, right? I like is looking after our internal needs and desires of what it means to be human. We have to move our bodies, we have to have creativity. And so I always talk about like creating these environments for yourself that make it impossible for you to fail. So I
Hmm.
do have, I was a runner back in my running days. I did half marathons and marathons. I have a home gym. Which is in the basement, which is, we'll get to that. It's probably not the best place. I was known for, sleeping in my running or walking clothes so that I wouldn't wake anybody up when I left early in the morning, rummaging, getting my clothes. Because that turns into an excuse of not to.
Hmm.
I don't want to wake up the whole house. So I would like force myself into these kind of rituals to make it impossible for me to not succeed, uh,
Right.
at what I was doing. And then when I became a writer, I had those skills and I was able to put those into my creative space and then also create kind of environment windows where my brain knows that I'm turning this music on, I'm walking into this room, it's this time, I have coffee in hand, all it's going to do is write. That's it.
Hmm.
Not check
Hmm.
social media, not do that. So I'm really good at that. But as I was going through some of the materials that you have, and, and I was learning how I could make this better, I learned that you mentioned about having the fitness space,
Hmm.
like say on your way to the kitchen. And I
Right.
thought I thought that's brilliant. That's really, really brilliant. In Benjamin Hardy's book, Willpower Doesn't Work, he talks about the chocolate cake. Like if you're trying to have an environment to live in a healthier body and you have a chocolate cake on your counter every single day, you're making it really hard for yourself. But if you
Hmm.
don't put that cake there, then your environment is set up for your success. And he
Right.
explains that so simply, just like you're explaining this here too. But another thing that you talk about that I'd love for you to dive into a little bit more is something that's called the sunny window effect. And what is that and why does it matter?
Sure. Okay, great. Yeah, the sunny window effect is so now we're getting into the cycles of nature and again, the physiological response and working with our environment to help to support us reaching our goals, our lifestyle goals. And so, even as a kid, I remember seeing a room and having a beam of sunlight coming in through the window and it would put a little sunny patch on the floor or on one particular cushion on the couch. This cushion was shaded, but this one had the sunny patch on it. And the family pets, whether it was the dog or the cat, that's where they would be. They would always curl up in the sun patch, in the sunny spot. And you know I remember times being in a room, maybe I'd be reading a book or just spending some time in there, and suddenly, the sun's coming through. It's really nice, but then a cloud would pass in front of it, and suddenly it's shade from it, and the sunbeam goes away, and the vibe of the room changes, just from that moment. And then the cloud passes, and the sun comes in again. And, we are so attracted to the light. Light is life, right? Like you can be standing at the entrance to a room and it can be the most beautifully decorated and well appointed space, very, very attractive and inviting. But when there's a beam of sunlight coming into the window, it's just that much more welcoming
Yeah.
for us. Yeah. And so in conscious home design, I said, okay, how can we put the sunny window effect to work for us intentionally? Knowing that it gives us a lift, knowing that it invites us in and draws us in. Is there some certain activities that really could benefit from having a sunny window? And so For me, for a lot of people, there are if I'll look through as we go through your life and I say, hey, what makes you tick? What do you like to, Karen, what do you like to do for creative activity? What do you like to do for personal development? What do you like to do for self-improvement? What do you like to do for physical exercise? How do you like to move your body? And, as we go through these things, they say, okay, where are the gaps in your life? Which activities are you feel like you're not getting enough of? Okay, let's try and support that. Why
Mhm.
are you not getting enough of that? Do you simply not have a space for it? And if not, well, let's create one. Let's dedicate space to that activity. Or maybe you have space for it. And I say, okay, you've got space, but you're not using it. Why? We go, oh, well, it's cluttered. It's got storage. All my Christmas decorations are in there, and it's no longer supporting what it's supposed to. It's
You've
been
been in my
supplanted with
basement,
something
right?
else. And
You've
so,
been in
okay,
my
fine.
basement. Yeah.
That's right. So now you just have to rearrange and rededicate the space to that activity. Or maybe, it's something where it's like, well, I love to play my cello, except the only time I have is after the kids go to bed. And my cello room is right next to the bedroom. And so I'm going to disturb them. And so then you have an adjacency problem. You have a space, it's well suited for playing the cello. It's just in the wrong location. So is there another place? Can you create separation between the
Mm.
things, Um, maybe the space is just uninviting. Maybe you have this thing that you like to do, but it's in a basement or it's in a garage and the air is musty and damp and it's cold and uninviting and it's rustic and you're just like, I don't want to go there because I'm just not inspired, and so it takes an act of will. It takes discipline to make yourself do that. And if you're pressed for time in the morning or you're tired at the end of the day, finding that will and that discipline to make yourself do that thing that you should do, but you just are tired. We have a
Yeah.
limited amount of willpower to spend every day on things. And it's like we may have already blown it just uh not responding to that person who cut us off because they had road rage. It's like that may have been our last expenditure of willpower, may have been just getting home safely, right?
No,
And so
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so true. And so like we have to in order like it's not willpower. Like I throughout my running years, I would have lots of people say, I wish I had your willpower. And I'm like, it's got nothing to do with willpower. It's because
Mhm.
I set up an environment for myself. Number one, I sleep in my running clothes. No judging, they're clean when I go to bed.
Yeah,
I also sign up for these races that I got to show up for, and nobody's going to move the date for me. So in order
right.
to show up, I need to prepare. So I've called myself a runner, even though I'm not calling myself a runner because I had issues with that. I'm like, oh no, I'm not a runner. I'm only running every day. But it's giving that no excuse framework. And so you're giving people yet another layer of that, which I think is fantastic because you can implement that absolutely right away. So to the listener that's wondering, and I'm kind of wondering because I'm all about like I like to take action right away. So if I was going to optimize one space or one room, like what it, I kind of feel like I know what your answer is going to be, but I want to know what your answer is going to be.
Mhm.
Like what's the one that moves the needle the most? Like the
Mhm.
area that would create the most impact quicker if I had to just choose one, and that
I love
costs the
it.
least amount of money. Like
Uh-huh. Sure. Where's the low-hanging fruit? If
yeah,
you're
that's
asking.
that's the word. Thank you
Yeah.
for finding that phrase.
So, you know, I love it. The quality of your questions determine the quality of your answers, right? And so
Mhm.
if you ask good questions, you'll get good answers. And so, you know, the home really is an ecosystem and it all works together in harmony. They all support each other. And it's kind of asking me that is kind of like saying, well, Taylor, what's your favorite organ? And I'm like, well, I kind of like my heart. Oh, but I also like my lungs. They're pretty good. Oh, kidneys are good. Oh, my tummy. Oh, I love my stomach. Boy, that really, what would I do without my stomach? It's kind of like, they're all my favorite. They all work together to support me well. And so Um, there isn't really a universal truth. I can't
Mhm.
say that this is the one space that will work the most, that is the low-hanging fruit for all people in all places. So what I want to say to you as an individual, to anyone listening today, to any of my clients and anyone I'm sharing this message with is you need to go through your home and find the gaps. You need to say, which of the three types of relationships would I like to have more of? Where am I seeing a little bit more support? Where is there opportunity for growth? What
Mhm.
space would make me come alive? Do I need to make sure I have better sleep and better rest? So do I need to work on my bedroom so I can have safe place to unwind and let go and recharge? Or no, what I have is a terrible bathroom. One person says, I just need to, I'm shortcutting my time in there. It's not feeling like I'm nurturing and giving myself the self-care I need. Another person says, well, I actually don't like my kitchen. I would prepare much better meals, which is so supportive. My nutrition and the whole family is going to benefit, but I hate working in my kitchen. And so we're always doing takeout food because I don't like it's poorly laid out. And so it's going to be an individual thing. You have to find the gaps and then focus on those. And so,
I think
yeah.
that that's why I felt like, we have a common theme, you and I, because like, throughout my coaching career, throughout my writing career, people always want to know, like, what can you help me with? And I come back with, well, what are you trying to do? Because it's so it's so different. Everybody just has this different unique expression of what they need to do and what's going to make them successful. And you said it just a few minutes ago, is like, you gotta ask the right questions.
Mm,
I was a cosmetician for years too. Like, I've worn so many different hats. A beautician for about 10 years, 10 to 12 years, and in the fitness industry, same time, looking after that outer core.
mhm.
And someone would come in and, you get used to these questions like, I'm here to get a moisturizer. What can you recommend? And it's like, well,
Mm,
we have to go through some questions about, like, because there's 50 million things that a moisturizer can do. So
sure.
I need to know delicately, because if you're talking to a woman that is middle aged, you've got to delicately get out of her, well, do you want the cream to repair the wrinkles, or are you just looking to slap on some moisturizer, and find the right experience for her?
Hmm.
Because I can't just go ahead and recommend to her, like, this is what I use and it's the best. That's
Hmm.
gonna get you nowhere. So
Sure.
you came back with a very a rich answer of, that depends. Like,
Conscious
pretty
home
sure.
design, we
Yeah.
we meet you wherever you are.
Yeah, and I love
And then
that.
we just help you, we find what's going to help you create yourself new. What's going to what's how can we create the next version of yourself that you envision for yourself? And I wrote the book Conscious Home Design with the big idea, and it was really, it's you've got a copy of it. It's not highly technical. It's not full of jargon. It's very accessible. You might not know the difference between one wall and another, but you can still read it and understand the ideas in
Yeah,
there, right? It's not
yeah.
it is rooted in science, but it's it doesn't read like an academic paper. I
Exactly.
then
It's an easy read. Yeah, and
Easy read.
to implement.
And so then I hired someone that had two master's degrees, one in social work and the other in psychotherapy. And this person read my book, and together we worked on um, creating the workbook which has exercises and worksheets,
Yeah.
which are designed to draw out, to ask the right questions, to get the answers that are going to uniquely create your own sort of fingerprint of what is going to make your house, uh, truly supportive in the biggest way. And so I like to have all of my clients answer those questions, whether they do the workbook on their own or whether I am interviewing them and extracting that information out in a conversation or interview style and taking those notes. You know, that's really what gets at the heart of the issue. And then from there, we can then start talking about shaping actual space. So this is before you draw a single picture, before you pick a paint color, before you make any plans, we want to understand, the core values of the people who are going to be living there. And then we can make sure that, you don't want to have the most beautiful house in the world, and yet it doesn't fit you and it doesn't
Yeah.
support you. It doesn't flow. It's
Yeah.
like that's
That's
just a
right.
museum. You don't we're gonna get you the aesthetic that you want, but we first before you that's a given. Of course, it's gonna look beautiful to you. Of course, you're gonna enjoy your space, but we want to make sure that it functions for you. That there's flow, and we're like you said, you what you did to make yourself succeed was you removed friction points. You
Yeah.
said, I want to be considerate of the people that I live with. I don't want to wake them up and disturb them. And so I'm just going to wear my track pants as pajamas so I can just get right up and hit and go out the door, silently, and get on my way, And so these are, conscious home design is the same thing. It's like, how can we build success into your life by removing friction points and providing opportunity?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So I have a personal question before we close. Uh,
Sure.
so what did you want to be when you grew up? Like when you
Huh.
well,
So I didn't know the word for it, but I always wanted to be an architect.
that's really cool.
Yeah, I was, as a child, as a young child, even preschool age, the blocks was my favorite. I liked to build, cities and structures and little, houses and little worlds for the action figures, and that continued all the way through middle school. I remember, other kids would. They'd get their action figures, whether they're girl dolls or boy dolls, whatever they're dolls, but they
Yeah.
just have different, clothing and different,
Yeah.
adventure stories around them. But other children, both boys and girls, very commonly would get their action figures together and have them do stuff. They'd go on activities and have adventures and have conversations and things like that. And that never, I mean, that was okay. I didn't mind playing that way, but that wasn't my highest love. For me, what was most enjoyable about playing was to dig trenches and build roads and set up forts and lookouts and perches and swings. And I would spend days just setting up a giant scene. If it was fair weather, it would be in the backyard. If it was not good weather, I'd take over the entire bedroom and the whole thing would become this giant mural or diorama, and I would just
Yeah.
set everything up. I'd spend days just setting the stage. And once everything was built and every action figure was positioned and in place, I would just stop and I would just gaze at it. And I could sit there and then look at it for 2 or 3 days, just taking in the satisfaction that the stage was set, And so that really is the mindset of an architect, because my job is to help you create the scene and it's your job to go live happily ever after. My job isn't to, get involved after it's built. It's just to set the stage and then my work is done and then
Yeah.
move on to the next project. So it was always there for me. It actually, and people had suggested, oh, you should be an artist. You're so good at drawing and painting. Oh,
Mhm.
you should be a carpenter because you're always drawing on graph paper, designs for houses and stuff. No one ever said the word architect to me. They said woodworker, carpenter, artist. It wasn't until I was, after I had sold my first company in my early 20s and I was traveling around going, what now, Taylor? What are you going to do with your life? And I was like, well, I had a very spiritual disposition. And I thought, well, maybe I'll be a monk, and I'll go join an ashram, and meditate for enlightenment. But I thought, no, I want to engage with people. I want to have, close relationships and I want to have creative activities. I want to do stuff. I didn't want to live a life of renunciation, of outer renunciation. I just knew that wasn't my path. So I said, well, okay, if you're going to stay in the world and be productive and be creative, and play house, what are you going to do? And I was like, and suddenly it's just a bang, the light bulb. I was like, oh, of course, I'm going to be an architect. I don't know how I'd ever thought of that before. It's always been there. So
It's
it
always
was
been with
just,
you. Yeah.
it was like destiny suddenly revealed itself to me, and so at 25 years old, I enrolled in college, to go and go back to school and get my bona fides. So
I love that. I really appreciate you sharing that. Here on the Creative Life in Motion podcast, I've said more than one time is that our purpose, a lot of times the clues to our purpose or that thing that we were that lives inside us that needs more, whether it's a creative outlet or it can be a business, it doesn't, but there's something that we don't do because we think that everybody else gives us this, you should be an artist, you should do this, you should be a nurse, you know they see other things in you, but that there's that innate thing, and the clues are usually hiding in our childhood.
that's
Right.
right.
And so
Ages 10, 11, 12. That's
so
the
you've
best
you've you've
time
just
to look.
you've just been another case study for that. Like,
Yeah.
I love how that all evolved, and we don't always see it, but it's never too late. It's never too late, and you're never done, and your purpose is always with you in some way.
Mm, mm.
So before we close, Taylor, could you tell people, like, if they wanted to work with you or if they wanted to work on their own, being guided by, some of your tools, where can they find you? And
Sure.
what do
Thanks,
you do?
Karen.
Yeah,
Yeah. So if, if what I'm saying makes sense to you, to someone listening, and you want to learn more, just visit my homepage, conscioushome.design.com. And on there, there's a contact me form. So if you have a specific project in mind, just enter your name and email and tell me a little bit about your project, and I'll get in touch. But there's also a link to buy the book and the workbook and the audiobook bundle. I think it's $47 for an instant digital download. Or you can also buy a physical copy, physical copies that I'll sign and mail to you. And you'll also get the instant digital download as well, if you get the physical package. And you can get a consultation with me if you want. So those are a couple different ways. You can DIY it yourself if you want, or or we can do it together. Just conscioushomedesign.com.
that's awesome. Thank you so much, Taylor. And I can vouch for this. It's a very actionable, you can implement strategy right away, no matter where you are or what you're doing. It's just like it's another one of those things that it's one of those hidden health things that sometimes we could be doing everything that we can. We could be working out hard, we could be eating really healthfully, but if our environment is tearing us down, it's not going to help the other health markers. So,
Right.
what if you didn't have to diet in 2026? What if all you needed to do is like shape up your environment? Like,
Absolutely.
how about that question? Is that the question of the year? It might be. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My message to everyone, the message of Taylor Stewart Architect and Conscious Home Design is that you are loved, you are respected, and you are unique. And your home should reflect that.
I
So
love that.
the low-hanging fruit, the truly low-hanging fruit for all people, since we were talking about that, the single biggest thing you could do is to go through your home and look for the opportunities for the three types of relationships and say, hey, am I having opportunity for giving relationship? Am I having opportunity for receiving relationship? Am I having opportunity for receiving reciprocal relationship? And then find those gaps and then, work to, put something up. We, you know, in my book, I'm very specific. I give a specific recipe on what you can do to actually support the individual types of relationships and what that could look like.
Yeah.
And so we actually didn't dive into that, that actual, redecorating work, on our call today, but it's there in the book, the formula, the recipe, the
Perfect.
step by step on how to support a reciprocal relationship, how to support a receiving relationship, how to support a giving relationship. You can do that in your home and all you need is the book and the workbook, and you can definitely do that. Or if you feel like you want a private consultation, definitely reach out to me and I can help you with that. So because
Thanks so much.
that's what really moves the needle.
Thank you so much, Taylor. And thank you for being so giving of your time and explaining everything for us. And I'll make sure that all of the links to get in touch with Taylor are below the description wherever you're looking at this and or listening. And that's about it for today. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.